All right, gang, if you're a business owner and you're running a call funnel and you're doing anywhere from 50K to 300K a month, you need to pay attention to this video because Google just dropped a new update to the way that their Gemini language learning model works, and it's absolutely fucking people left, right, and center in their call funnels. And the worst part is, most people have absolutely no idea it's happening. So in this video, I'm going to take you behind the scenes of the latest Google update here, what it's doing to your call funnel specifically with search. And this is also happening with the other language learning models, with ChatGPT, with Grok, with Claude. And ultimately, what can you do to influence this to make sure that you're still booking a high number of calls, and maybe even book more calls if you make these changes? If you're new to the channel, welcome. My name's Jamie Atkinson. All we talk about on this channel is getting past 100K months, adding on multiple 100K months on top of it. And if you're a business owner that's either looking to get to your first 100K a month or beyond, this is going to be a fun channel for you. We talk a lot about earned media, paid media, and the conversion systems that you need to get ahead. Now, quick earnings disclaimer: we don't make income promises or claims. We don't even know who you are, and there really is not that many businesses that even make it to $1 million a year, less than 3%, in fact. Let alone going beyond that. And so everything in this video is just for education purposes. All right, let's get into the video. So as you can see by what I'm just popping up on the screen here, Google's got this new thing, right? Where when you do a search and you put some information out there, there's AI overview that's now popping up. And I know that this feature has been around for a little minute, and people have been using AI to actually help them to figure out their, decisions with what they're doing. But this is a giant change for how people are going to be doing their pre-call research. And it's massively impacting call funnels, not just hypothetically. We're seeing this happen in real time with lots of our different clients. And so basically what's happening is, when a client is going through your call funnel process and they're doing their due diligence and they're looking up to see if you're legit, Google is now shoving its AI directly down people's throats, and it's pulling all sorts of information that's often not accurate and not true, and putting it in front of your potential prospects, basically telling them to run a mile and to not actually use you in terms of their service. So let me break down what's actually going on with this new update, what you can actually do as a business owner to influence it, and really help you understand how media, specifically earned media like podcasting, authority websites, Reddit, these different elements are actually really affecting these language learning models, and how you can make sure you're not getting caught out by something that you maybe weren't even aware of in the first place. So the first thing that I want to help you guys understand is, we call this process the shadow funnel, because this is the funnel that exists that you're not actively aware of. So let's just say, for example, your funnel right now is you run ads, people go onto a video sales letter, from there they book a call, right? And then they go onto a thank you page, right? They book in on the calendar, and then you have a thank you page that's a confirmation process. If this is your typical call process and you're booking sales calls this way, this is the traditional call funnel process, and everything that you're in control of, things like emails, things like retargeting ads, and anything like videos that you're actually putting on that page, on the confirmation page, is something that you have direct influence over and something you put out actively. But there is a whole other shadow funnel that exists in this scenario that basically sits in the background between all of these stages. And so between somebody clicking an ad and actually going through your call booking process, there's a lot of research that happens. And then after somebody books a call and before they get onto a sales call, there's also a lot of pre-call research that's actually happening. And so the first thing to understand is, the shadow funnel is basically done in two parts. Your shadow funnel happens pre-call and it happens post-call. So when I say in this example pre-call, I mean before they actually book in. And so this is typically, somebody sees an ad, they go onto your page, they think that you look legitimate, but they're probably more of a skeptical person. And so they're going to go do some research before they actually opt in, watch your VSL. They're really trying to protect their time. That is not anybody that we actually care about. This type of person is not a great prospect. They're somebody that is usually very risk averse, and usually they don't make great clients. We typically want to go after clients that are more high risk. They're more willing to take the front end action, but a lot of those people actually have back end pre-call research that's actually happening. So in this instead process, what I want you to think about here is that people book in on your calendar, they then go to your FAQ page, your confirmation page when people are actually booking in, and then they're going to go onto a call. Now, typically, the shadow funnel takes part in two distinct phases. It happens before the call, and it also happens after the call. And so when I say shadow funnel, I really just mean what people can find about you online by looking themselves. This is Google search, it's LLMs, it's ChatGPT, it's Google Gemini. It's all the things that people are looking for to try and figure out whether you are legitimate or not. What they're looking for here is congruency. Your core message that you're talking about in your ad and your call funnel, do you have other messaging that also repeats that? Is there other customers, other experiences, other people that are saying, yeah, this person is talking about the same thing as what they're actually doing this ad about? Now, here's the reason that this is really important in the Google update. For most of you, you actually don't usually put a lot of effort and energy into what's going on in the shadow funnel. You focus all your time, energy, and attention in the actual funnel itself. And this was less important before because it was less obvious in the results. There was no big AI that was pushing people away from your funnel and basically telling them not to trust you. But in the last 3 to 6 months especially, we've seen more and more situations where things like show rate has dropped significantly. Actual close rates have dropped significantly as well. And the biggest reason why there's this sort of trending downward result in terms of what we've got seeing here is because people are doing their due diligence and their call research, and what they are finding is not matching what you are saying in the message. And so everything that we try and intentionally put out in the shadow funnel is basically to create consistency in your message. And usually this will look like podcasts, it will look like blog posts, it will look like a website, social media, and basically whatever you are saying in your funnel, you want to have matching consistent messaging kind of across the board. Now here's where this Google AI update becomes very, very, very important. The problem is that now when people are doing their due diligence and when they're doing that search, they're going on to Google, they're going into that big search bar and they're typing in, is this person legit? Is this person a scam? Is this business going to actually help me? And Google is giving you that big, pretty overview, this one here, that's actually telling you information. The problem is that these AI LLMs, these language learning models, they're not massively good at telling the difference between real and not real. They're very sensitive. And so what's happening is that these AI overviews are pulling in information from lots of different sources. And these different sources of information aren't always actually true, and they're not always actually helpful for you in your business. Case in point, I had a customer that came through and Googled the other day, is Media Firestorm legit? This is our coaching program. And it actually pulled into the AI search that he did a bunch of information about a podcast scam. And what was happening in this podcast scam is that this weird company from India or something were doing podcast interviews, logging into people's ad manager and then scamming them for $2,000 or $5,000, which was pretty significant. It was kind of a sucky thing to have happen, is for $2,000 to $5,000 to just disappear and have this terrible podcasting experience. But all of that information was being pulled into the search about my company, and the conclusion that the AI came up with was, actually, it looks like this might not be an all that trustworthy company. It might be a scam. Now, when somebody reads that, having done their due diligence process, what do you think is going to happen? They're immediately going to doubt it. They're not even going to show up to the call. Why would they waste their time if something has got a pretty high likelihood that it's going to be a scam? And you will start to see this happening time and time again inside of your call funnels unless you go and make some changes to this. So because these LLMs are significantly sensitive and it's pulling in all this information, what we need to make sure that we're doing is, as a company, is feeding the LLMs, the language learning models, with relevant and accurate information, and as much as possible, removing the information that isn't credible. And we do this by, first of all, understanding the 5 main ways that the LLMs get in data. So the way that these language learning models work is that they pull in information from these different sources. We'll see typically a very high weight from authority sites and podcast appearances. Authority sites are things like a website that's been attached to a podcast with a really high domain authority, or websites like YouTube, Medium, podcast sites themselves, really high ranking sites. Similarly, the reason that press works very well is for the same reason that these press websites typically have very high domain authority and ranking. We also see that Reddit actually has one of the biggest influences on these language learning models. So if there's a Reddit article out there that has a discussion about your product or service, or even something remotely related to your business, that's going to get pulled into this discussion, as well as blog posts as well. Not to mention, under authority sites, you also have to factor in that this is also things like Facebook, other social media sites. We had a post on Facebook that mentioned the word "if you need a guest," and again mentioned the scam that was happening. So it was like, if you're looking for a guest or if you need a guest, just be very careful because there are these scams going around. And that Facebook post, which was from 2021, again got pulled into these search results. So when the language learning models are looking at all of these data points and information, it's not actually very good often at distinguishing a difference between a post that's general and something that's actually about your business. And if you ever look at some of these AI summaries that are happening, it's making a very certain sounding conclusion, often from data that is not very certain. And so firstly, what you want to do is you want to, one, have positive influences for the data, and two, you want to remove any bad associations. And so I'm going to go through top level and try and help you guys understand a little bit how to do this. Just to be really clear, I'm not going to give you the specific companies or strategies that we use to influence both getting more content out there, as well as removing any of the negative content. That's something that we include in our Media Firestorm program, where we help business owners get booked on high quality podcasts, as well as help them install marketing systems to get more sales calls and get more momentum and ultimately scale their company. We do, twice a week group calls. You get access to me as well as all of our systems and SOPs, quarterly masterminds, really just designed to help you to grow your marketing and do more marketing inside of the business. And inside of that program is where I go into a lot more detail with the specific SOPs and companies that we recommend to get more press, to get these podcast appearances, to remove any of these bad associations from sites like Reddit and other social media posts, as well as the strategies we use. So if you want a little bit more hands-on help, as well as being able to get my support in implementing this, check that out inside of the description, and you can apply to see if working together makes sense. So what can you do about this? Well, the first thing that you can do is really begin by just looking in terms of what is actually currently going on. Go and type in your name, your company's name, and do searches like, is this person legit? Is this company legit? Is this person a scam? Is this company a scam? How does this product work? How does this person work? And what you'll find from those search results is you'll often start to see the breadcrumbs and the trails of where the LLM is getting this information, so you can start to see and understand this a little bit better. And just be aware, guys, if you're watching this video now, you are early to fixing these processes inside of call funnels. There will be businesses that don't realize that this is impacting their call funnels for 6 months, 12 months, 18 months, even a couple of years. And you're going to be able to get ahead of this by feeding this positive data into the system. So first of all, you want to look and try and figure out, well, what is currently affecting the way that the LLMs are looking at you and your business? And again, what you want to look at there is there anything I can do to either remove these negative associations or replace them with something positive? For example, if you have a negative Reddit post, could you go in and actually reach out to anybody that's been an unhappy customer that's posting on Reddit and see if you can make them happy so that they change what they've written? There's also companies you can use to help you with this. And along there, you can also have some positive associations. Could you get your clients to go in and leave positive reviews? Now, that's a really good example of what you can do with Reddit. Now, in terms of once you figure out where all the negative associations are, you want to try and remove them, disassociate them, and basically clear all the crap out of the way so none of the incorrect information is being fed into the learning models. Now, the second thing you want to do is you actually want to make positive associations. And so one of the things that I really like to do inside of this is start with media. And so if you're going out and you're doing earned media, you're doing podcast appearances, what I try and focus on is actually addressing right out of the gate a couple of episodes which are for these specific search terms. So doing an episode where it's like, is getting booked on podcasts with Media Firestorm a scam? Is Media Firestorm and needaguest.com a legit company to get booked on shows? And I'll try and get booked on high-level podcasts with strong brand authority, where they're also going to be putting that podcast onto their website. And we're going to be using those specific titles and terms to really try and win over these language models. And on top of that, the more of these media appearances you can make, the more of these positive associations you can make, where you're featuring, talking about your company name, your product name, and you as the business owner, and you can get these appearances, the more that data is going to get fed into these language learning models, and the more positive associations that are going to come. Out of all of the associations, we find that Reddit has got the strongest pull in terms of what the language learning models pull from. And then we found that podcast appearances is actually the second strongest. And sometimes it even trumps Reddit because there's a lot more context that tends to go into those podcast appearances. Nowadays, because of transcripts and because of information being put into both the podcast and the Spotify search and into websites, you've just got a lot more scrapable information. Because remember, AI is not truly this artificial intelligence. These are glorified web scrapers being put together into these language learning models. And so all it's doing is scraping information from sources. So if you can feed more of those sources into the World Wide Web so that the AI can pick it up, you're going to have a better time. And so the first is podcast appearances. You can do this once or twice a week, pretty consistently. And again, we want to be targeting and focusing on having the right kind of titles and conversations where we're answering these most common questions. This is also part of our strategy of how we create strong back-end conversion for our funnels by breaking out podcast clips from these episodes where we're addressing certain concerns and questions that people have in the sales process. So, for example, a lot of people's big number one question for joining Media Firestorm is, what kind of podcasts am I going to get booked on? So you best believe that we're going to have podcast episodes where we talk about what kind of shows you can get booked on when you're using Media Firestorm or needaguest.com, as well as relevant titles to feed into the LLM. So that's the first thing, positive associations with media. Now, what we also recommend here is also repurposing these content to YouTube, making sure you've also got highlighted clips. You know, you can put out 8-minute versions of 60-minute podcast appearances on little YouTube channels, which again, doesn't take a long amount of effort, but you can have a podcast appearance on somebody's authority site and on a podcast channel. You can have the same episode go out on your personal YouTube channel, and you can also have highlighted clips where you talk about these specific points, again, all trying to feed back in to the language learning models. Now, the second thing that I want to talk about here is Reddit. Again, if you've got Reddit and there are some negative associations, what you want to do is try and remove the negative and bring in positive associations. Now, there are particular companies that you can use that will help you to do this. And again, we don't share these on this YouTube channel. This is something we really just tend to share inside of our Media Firestorm program with our clients. But again, if you've got negative Reddit threads, you want to try and get those updated, you want to try and speak to them, you want to try and create a positive influence, because again, this is going to be contributing to those lower show rates. Now, the third thing that we want to talk about here is blogs. Now, one of my favorite things to do is to make sure that when we have a podcast episode that's been aired, is actually turning it into a blog for our website. Again, really, really powerful in feeding the LLM the correct information. Now, how we do this is not all that complicated. You know, we take the transcript of the episode, we throw it into ChatGPT, you know, we get an editor to go through and actually tart it up a bit and make it look like a really good blog post. And then you can put that out on a blog very, very easily with not a lot of effort. Just literally transcribing what you talked about in the episode. You can also do it for YouTube, like we'll likely do a blog post for this YouTube video to put it out there. Again, the goal here, feeding the LLM with more of this relevant information. Now, the final thing you want to focus on here is press. And so think of it this way, whenever you do a podcast appearance, whenever you put out any type of new media, if you're able to take that angle and actually put some press out related to the brand, if it's a scam, you know, what's going on inside of the business itself, any changes or new initiatives that's been added in, again, this all enables the LLM to get significantly more data that they can actually feed on to give relevant search results. And so you can often use companies to write up press releases, to reach out and do articles on different websites. And this is another fantastic way that you can actually just feed more information into the language learning model. Now, all of this comes back to making sure that you understand about the shadow funnel. And so in terms of what the shadow funnel is, it's everything that your prospect is going to be doing when they are not going through your official marketing funnel. It's going to be the research of what they're looking for, making sure that you've got matchy branding between your pages, your social medias, your website, and all of your content that's out there. It's making sure that when they Google you or they ask questions for these search engine results, it can pull in relevant answers from podcast episodes or content that you've put out there. And typically the shadow funnel is one of those hidden things that most people don't talk about that is absolutely fundamental to growing a business up to $1 million months and beyond. And it's rare that you'll ever speak to a business owner doing $10 million plus a year who hasn't already figured this out and has got this consistency in their messaging across all of these different mediums. So I hope this is helpful. Make sure you get ahead of these new Google AI updates before they start to kill and tank your call funnels and your show rates. Doing this is also going to be typically something that's going to help you a lot in contributing to better close rates inside of the process. And if you want to learn more about how we help you to positively influence everything that's happening both after somebody books a call, in the call funnel itself, and within the shadow funnel, maybe reach out to us inside of Media Firestorm and we can see if we can help you. All those links are down in the description. Have a great day. Go crush it. I hope you book some more calls, and I hope this helps with your call funnel.